From underpaying his fighters to focusing more on his personal gains, Dana White may have rebuilt the UFC from the ground up, but his methods are questionable. But as controversial as he is, we all know Dana's been a big reason for the promotion's growth over the past few years, even if most people are unaware of the ways he's harmed the platform. For starters, his fighters aren't paid enough. Over the years, pay in the world of MMA, particularly within the UFC, has seen significant increases. But it still falls short compared to the earnings of athletes in other sports like boxing. Even the highest profile UFC fighters can't match the financial success of boxers like Manny Pacquiao and Floyd Mayweather, who earn significantly more than their UFC counterparts. This difference in earnings is pretty big, even for amateur YouTube boxers, and the blame falls on Dana White's aggressive business tactics for that. But let's take a closer look at Dana White's background and what makes him stand out. Dana White's journey started with a deep love for MMA, and he really wanted to promote this sport. So he began by organizing and promoting local fights, starting from the bottom. White became very popular for overseeing some of the most intense and exciting MMA fights, and earned the nickname the Dana White of the East Coast. Then in 2001, Dana White, along with his partners Frank and Lorenzo Fertitta, bought the struggling UFC organization, with White as the president who turned UFC into a billion-dollar organization and the top MMA promotion worldwide. His unwavering dedication and hard work played a huge role in his success in the MMA industry. But as his power and influence grew, people started questioning his leadership approach, suggesting that his strict focus on discipline, responsibility, and loyalty may sometimes overshadow the well-being of the fighters. In fact, he's even been quoted saying that he's more interested in running a business than trying to be everyone's friend. This attitude gained him both praise and criticism from people in the MMA community, because to some, he's seen as a visionary who took MMA to new heights, but others see him as a dictator who prioritizes profits over fighters' safety. Either way, the UFC has become a global sensation under his leadership, and his leadership style is definitely something to look into. After all, he reshaped the landscape of MMA as the president of the UFC, and played a huge role in making the sport popular, attracting new fans, and turning it into a mainstream phenomenon with a worldwide following. If it wasn't for him, fighters like Conor McGregor, Jon Jones, and Jose Aldo wouldn't have been as rich and popular as they are today. But nobody can deny that boxers get lots more sponsorship opportunities, which is why the UFC has now become notorious for not compensating its fighters properly. And this issue has had significant implications. One case in point is the legendary MMA heavyweight Fyodor Emelianenko, who consistently turned down offers from the UFC. In the beginning, Dana White was eager to arrange a showdown between Emelianenko and Brock Lesnar, but Emelianenko declined this proposal. White made a second attempt in 2012, hoping to bring Emelianenko out of retirement, but even that was unsuccessful. The main reason behind Emelianenko's refusal to join the UFC was his perception of Dana White. Emelianenko characterized White as someone focused on his personal interests over the welfare of his fighters, and he even said that White had an inhumane approach to his contracts with fighters. But that hasn't really made a difference to White's popularity. Sure, he's also implemented new rules and safety measures that have made the sport safer for fighters and more appealing to a wider audience, but he's still criticized for staying focused on profits at the expense of a fighter's well-being. But there have been accusations of mistreatment, inadequate compensation, and insufficient support for fighters. The biggest criticism by far has been the absence of adequate health care for fighters, which has prompted many fighters to voice their concerns, with some fighters like Francis Ngannou leaving the organization for good, arguing that the UFC's growth has come at the cost of fighters who don't receive fair compensation. As expected, these allegations have had people talking about Dana White's savage leadership style and his impact on the sports landscape. But despite all that, he has undeniably made a huge impact, even though he's more of a dictator than a leadership. I mean, he literally transformed the UFC into a billion-dollar enterprise and took MMA from a niche sport to a mainstream combat sport like boxing. Besides, his approach also involves a strong emphasis on discipline, responsibility, and loyalty, using whatever means necessary to achieve his objectives. And his hands-on management style and his knack for adapting to challenges are qualities that some admire. while others see them as signs of his uncompromising nature that's too hard on fighters. His stance of, "I'm not here to be everyone's friend, I'm here to run a business," has also been talked about a lot within the MMA community, with them asking for a more compassionate approach towards fighters. He also favors some fighters over others. It's not unusual for the UFC president to have his preferred fighters, but there have been instances where playing favorites has raised questions about the promotion's fairness. And despite the UFC's commitment to a merit-based system and rankings where the best fighters rise to the top and fight for titles, certain fighters receive special treatment from Dana White. Take Colby Covington as an example. He's going to receive a welterweight title shot later this year, even though he hasn't competed since early 2022. In contrast, Belal Muhammad has been on an insane 9-win streak, but he doesn't seem to be in the running for a title shot. Similarly, Stipe Miocic is getting the title shot against Jon Jones, even though he hasn't competed since his loss to Francis Ngannou in 2021. To make matters worse, Mark Hunt accused Dana of hiding Brock Lesnar's failed pre-fight drug test reports. As expected, Lesnar went on to win the fight at UFC 200 by unanimous decision, and Hunt was upset by this, claiming that not only did Dana White know about Lesnar's failed drug test, but other top UFC executives were also aware of it and tried to keep it quiet to ensure the fight went ahead as planned. Hunt was so angry with the situation that he took legal action against the UFC by filing a lawsuit. What makes this even more surprising is that Dana chose not to conduct an investigation into the matter, but instead allowed the controversy to fade away on its own. These are the types of things that have had some consequences, like Ngannou leaving the UFC. But that also had to do with Dana having more control over contract negotiations. Francis Ngannou revealed that he had negotiated his most recent contract with the UFC prior to his fight against Miocic, and during these negotiations, he made a suggestion that made Dana White feel uneasy. Ngannou proposed that they prioritize the Miocic fight and engage in negotiations after each fight, rather than finalizing a contract 6 weeks before the bout, which was the UFC's preference. Plus, Ngannou shared insights into his initial interaction with Dana White, during which he showed confidence in his abilities to the UFC president, who initially found it appealing. But when contract talks hit a roadblock later on, White interpreted Ngannou's behavior differently. And following his initial title shot loss to Miocic and a defeat to Derek Lewis, White criticized Ngannou for what he perceived as an inflated ego. And in the end, Dana declined to incorporate provisions for boxing like Francis asked, as well as health insurance, or even the ability for him to secure his own sponsors. All because Dana White is and always will be the top dog in the organization. This has gotten people talking about the nature of White's savage leadership style, especially his recent partnership with Paul, which some see as yet another selfish move to attract new fans, make more money, potentially shifting the UFC towards a more entertainment-driven and profit-oriented direction like the WWE. But others see it as an opportunity to engage a new generation of fans and make the sport more appealing. This partnership has sparked lots of debates. But irrespective of what we think, there's no denying that Dana White is the only one who put MMA on the map. So, whether you're a fan or a critic of his savage leadership style, it's clear that he transformed the UFC into a billion-dollar organization and elevated MMA from a niche sport to mainstream success. His leadership style may not resonate with everyone, but his ability to adapt and thrive in challenging circumstances is a valuable trait applicable to any industry he enters.